I'm Anders Zavala, I'm the recycling manager. I work in environmental services. And now over to you, Dottie.
Hi everyone, I'm Dottie. I'm a recycling officer. I work in Anders' team in environmental services, and I'm mainly focused on this waste collection change.
And over to Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Williams, also a recycling manager at the council, working part-time alongside Ander. Apologies for the lack of video on my part today.
Okay, so we, all three of us, work in the environmental services strategy team. I'm not sure whether you can hear the noise of the DIY. If it's too, let me just swap to my headphones in case you're.
Apologies for that. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Okay. So
operations team. The operations team do the actual deliveries and collections of all the waste and recycling collections a year. So I'm just going to give you an overview of what we're going to discuss today. The first one is the recycling services. So I work alongside Sarah for it's now 15 years. We have seen the changes in recycling services since we introduced it. We have also seen the amount of waste they generating and the type of waste that is changing over these many years. Then we're going to go on. Dottie's going to explain a bit more about the service change, why we need this change, the communications approaches, and what are the waste policies. And we will end up with answering some of your questions. We have got some from a Slido, but if you do want to actually ask questions, you can type them on the Q&A button. We will answer them at the end of the presentation. Right, so the first of all is the recycling timeline. The first big contract or the first recycling service was introduced in 2003 with the first private contract. So we had a door-to-door segregated collections of paper, glass, metal and steel from the green box. Then in 2005, we introduced a waste prevention implementation plan. So this was looking at not recycling, but at reducing waste at source. And that included nappies, reusing furniture, home composting. There was a whole wide range of activities. We're still quite strong on that, but we now call it the Zero Waste Hackney campaign. In 2007, we were the first council, I believe, in London, if not in the UK, to introduce food waste collections. We also introduced plastic bottle recycling in 2007. The last service change that we delivered, so you look at 2003, that was big service change. Then in 2013, that was the next service change. So we haven't had a big service change since for about 7 years. That was the recycling collections was brought in-house, but that was done with a mixed recycling collection. By 2015, we already had been delivering recycling collections from block of flats and estates, but we were looking quite heavily on how to improve the bin stores and the recycling. So you might have heard that we're closing chutes across the states. Then in 2019, we had the environment strategy coming from the Mayor of London, which was basically requesting us to do more than what we're doing. We've done so much education. We work with different partners, and one of the big changes that we acknowledged that we weren't doing was the fortnight collections. So we put down a proposal that we would consult, and then we will deliver it in 2021 if it was approved. That was approved in May last year, and that is the plan for now. So it was approved in June, and we need to deliver it by March 2021. And the recycling increase was 28. It was 31%, but it would have been from the current recycling rate, which is 28. So it might seem like it's not a big increase, only three nominal or 3 percentage points. But actually, if you look back at the recycling rates over the last years, we were flatlining, and we didn't increase our recycling for about 6 to 7 years. And that took us about between 23 to 28. So you can see 4% increase over 7 years, and we are now wanting to increase 3% extra in just over 12 months. Currently, you probably are aware of that. This is what we offer, which is a weekly collection, except for garden waste. On the next slide, and a bit of a overview of how Hackney sits within London. So London sits London is split into different disposal authorities. So by law, Hackney is only allowed to collect waste. We do not do the arrangements for the disposal of waste or the recycling contracts. But we do get North London Waste Authority who does that for us, and for the 7 other North London boroughs. So we got here a picture of the energy from waste plant. If you can see here, the energy from waste plant is in Edmonton. There's a new one being built, and it will be finalized by 2029, I believe. So we still got quite a long time. And you can see an example of the current one, which is one of the oldest incinerators in the UK. The grabbers come here, pick up anything that is being deposited here. As you can tell, there's waste that could have been recycled. Out of here, then is taken into the ovens, and that oven generates heat, which then produces energy to 60,000 households. So energy from waste is good, but it's not as good as recycling, and even better to reduce waste in the first place. So then, as we mentioned before, we have got mixed recycling facility service, and we are questioned about how can you separate the recycling. Well, it's done first of all by pickers, manual pickers. You can see on the top where there's the light windows. There are actual manual pickers taking away from the bigger items that are not meant to be there. We can see toilet seats, basketball balls, all sort of things that are not meant to be recycled here. Everything is recyclable in theory. However, if there's no market for it, then the market doesn't want it, and therefore they don't want us to send that to the recycling facility. In the recycling facility, then after the manual pickers, you get the flutes, the density, the optic laces, the magnets, different weighing scales that separate the waste by type. So we get cardboard, and then you get metals and cans, glass bottles, and plastics. Then those bales are then sent for onward recycling. And the last one is the organic waste. In 2007, where we introduced food waste, we used to collect it solely for composting. As the market improved on the technologies, we now generate renewable energy plus the biofertilizer liquid that is used in farmlands. So we actually, there's different environmental life cycle analysis that shows that anaerobic digestion is better than the in-vessel composting plant that we used to have. In here, you can see the columns in blue tend to be to the right, and you're wondering why the blue and the green. The green highlights those boroughs that are from the inner borough of Greater London. So that will be Hackney, City of London, Town Hamlets. Those ones are, you can see that there is a lower recycling rate. This is quite common, not just in Hackney, in London, but those areas with higher densities or higher deprivation tend to get a lower recycling rate. We know this because we have share the studies and findings from across the world, from Sydney to New York, and those deprived and very high density areas with high transition population tend to have lower recycling rates. And the next one. So yeah, we still have got more to do. We collect and we collect everything. Of what we collect from recycling put up by households is 28% what we are recycling. However, when we look at the waste composition analysis of the waste that is being put in dustbins or people's wheelie bins or whatever is taken as waste, we find that 54% of that could have been recycled. Out of that 54%, half of that is food waste. And over the years, we've done some research and behavior change studies, and it looks like for certain households, food waste is not an issue because it's organic and plastic is the big thing to tackle. There is more studies to show that food waste actually is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. There is a lot of resource being put for being used in order to produce food for the world, whether it's from land resources, water, transportation, storage, cooking, disposal. And food waste is actually one of the critical materials that we not collecting enough. We have seen from borrowers who have gone fortnightly that food waste participation increases. That's because we will be collecting food waste weekly, and waste will be collected fortnightly. I think it's over to you, Dottie, now.
Thanks, Ander. Yeah, I'll take over from here and give you a little bit more information about what the waste collection changes involve. So like Ander explained, a council decision was made earlier this year, back in spring, to change waste services. The waste collections for the properties affected will be going fortnightly instead of weekly from 1st of March 2021, which means that your non-recyclable waste will be collected every 2 weeks instead of every week. However, like Ander said, we're keeping recycling services weekly. So that's your green sack for mixed recycling and food waste collections. There'll be no changes there. Garden waste collections will remain fortnightly, but they will move to your recycling collection day to make that more simple to manage. As well as reducing the frequency of waste collections, households will also be provided with a new bin to contain waste. So there's a maximum capacity that you can put out for collection. That will be, for most houses, a 180 litre wheeled bin, and the bins will be provided from January 2021. So you can look out for those in January and February next year. Certain households, however, will be eligible to apply for an extra bin to fit in more waste. So that would be if you live in a large family household, if you have a baby in nappies, or perhaps if there's medical waste produced by your household. So I mentioned that this won't be all properties affected. So the service change is for street level properties who receive green sack services for dry mixed recycling. So that's generally houses or houses that have been converted into flats. This service change in particular won't affect properties with communal bins like estates or flats above shops. So why do we need the change? Anders given us a fantastic background to all the work we've been doing with waste and recycling in the last few years in Hackney. And essentially the change is about recycling more and wasting less. So that is why it's only the non-recyclable waste, which will be reduced in frequency and reduced in the space and the amount that you can put out for collection. And this is all about sending less waste to the incinerator that Anders showed us a picture of. So we want to send less waste to incineration and do more recycling. We estimate that 4,500 tonnes of waste, which is the equivalent to 450 bin lorries, will be recycled instead of incinerated every year as a result of this service change. And this is just to reduce our impact on the planet and reduce the impact of waste management on the planet in response to the climate emergency that we know we're facing. And we estimate that 3,000 tonnes of carbon savings will result from the service change. As Anders showed us, there's already a number of London boroughs that have switched to fortnightly waste. All 15 of those have already seen their recycling rates increase. Here is a timeline of what's coming next for the service change. So you can see where we are there in purple. In November 2020, we are beginning to launch our communications around the service change. So one of the questions we received in the Slido Q&A that we've had open for the last week or so is all about the communications campaign that's going alongside this. So I'll show you a few more slides on the communications specifically in a moment. And also here in November 2020, we're hosting these types of resident engagement events to answer your questions. And then coming up after December, early next year, the wheelie bins will be being delivered to your property. And in January to February, we will also be launching a door-to-door engagement campaign. So we will have a team of door knockers visiting every household affected by the service change, and they will be on hand to provide information about the changes, to answer your questions on the doorstep, and to take orders for things like your green sacks and food caddy liners. And then on the 1st of March 2021, the new service will launch. here are some examples of the communications that we've got going out. So there have been a few bits and pieces out already, but from January is when we'll launch our final push before the service change. So that's when we will have large posters going around the borough. We will have leaflets that hang on the handles of the wheelie bins that will be delivered. So you'll see those as you go and take your waste out. We'll be sending leaflets to all homes affected by the service change. You can see an example of that there. We'll have adverts on the side of the waste and recycling collection vehicles driving around the borough, and we will be managing a social media advert campaign. Alongside those different communications, we will have the door knockers out in the borough, which I explained. And from February, we will be launching a front and back page advert on the cover of Hackney Today, which goes to all properties in the borough. And we will also be sending a more detailed information pack to every single household affected by the service change. So that will include things like a new collection calendar, information on what you can and can't recycle, information about how the service change will work, frequently asked questions, and contact details if you have any more questions to ask us. These are hot off the press. These have just been designed. So this is an example of the actual design that you'll be receiving next year. And I will just hand back over to Ander for this section.
Hi. So I guess from the lessons learned that we have got from all the boroughs and all the councils across the UK, just what's mentioned in there, 2/3 of local authorities have already gone fortnightly. We have been advised that we need to provide enforcement. So the waste policies for this case will be that some households will be able to apply for an extra bin, but for anyone that has got a wheelie bin, then they will need to be keeping the lid shut, and that we will not be collecting side waste. This is to ensure that we keep the amount of waste to 180 litre bins per household. We recognize that people will not be able to understand the policies or the services straight away. So we will have a new behavior change team going across the borough and the enforcement team. There will be different stages to the enforcement team. Residents that do not comply straight away, they will get a friendly letter saying, please note that this is not how you should be presenting your waste, and this is how you should be presenting it, and please ensure that you recycle all your items, because recyclables are not meant to be in the waste bin. And for those that keep repeating that offense or that non-compliance is repeated, we will be sending an enforcement behavior person to be speaking face-to-face to the resident. If after multiple non-compliance, we will be at the very last stage, we will be providing a fixed penalty notice. So I think we have come to the end of the presentation. I think that, oh yeah, you got one more.
Yeah, sure. If you're wondering what happens next, you don't need to do anything yet. The collections won't change until the 1st of March 2021, and you will receive a lot more information in the meantime in the form of post to your door and from the door knocking team. If you don't already recycle with your green sacks for your mixed recycling or your food waste, or you want to recycle more, or you just need some more sacks or liners or anything like that, please visit our website. You can see the web address there. And we will be moving on to a Q&A in a moment. If after this session you think of any other questions or you want to get in touch for any reason, our email address is shown there. So it's waste.strategy@hackney.gov.uk.